As some of you may know, alongside the podcast, I also run the How Does She Do It online membership community. And I have to say, it's become one of the things that I am most proud of in my career. It's a small, intimate, subscription-based community for women in business. And at its heart, it's about one thing: making sure that you never have to feel alone in running your business. Because if there's one thing I hear more than anything else, it's that running your own business can be incredibly isolating. The self-doubt, uncertainty, the days when you're not sure if you're doing the right thing, I've been there, and I know that so many of you have too. This membership offers a genuine support network, real women, real conversations, and real help when you need it. There's online networking, monthly guest expert masterclasses, business tools, accountability, support including online co-working, a brilliant WhatsApp community, and an incredible directory too. All in one place, all designed to help you not just survive in business, but truly thrive. This community is growing all of the time, and the energy within it honestly blows my mind on a regular basis. I'm watching women grow in confidence, push through their comfort zones, and build connections that genuinely change the way they feel about their businesses and themselves. If any of this resonates with you, and if you've been listening to this podcast thinking I could really do with a community like that, then I would absolutely love for you to come and find out more. You can find all the details in the show notes, and if you'd like to have a chat with me before you take the plunge, please reach out. I would love to hear from you. Warmly welcoming you to How Does She Do It, the podcast, with me, your host, Jo Ferroni. Join me on my journey as I explore finding a gentle balance in both business and life, because being kind to ourselves is our superpower. In today's episode, I sit down with Lucy Colgan, the amazing host of The Wilderness of Creativity, a brilliant podcast exploring how creativity shapes our mental health, well-being, and sense of self. Lucy takes us behind the scenes of how and why the podcast came to be, and how it became, almost accidentally, somewhere to rebuild a sense of self. Nearly 100 episodes in and 2 years on, she reflects on what it's taught her about mentorship, her own voice, and giving herself permission not to be an expert. From there, the conversation opens out into a bigger question Lucy's been sitting with for years: why the value of creativity in schools still needs defending after 3 decades of research already proving it. She makes a brilliant and compelling case. So if you've ever wondered whether creativity is something you're allowed to claim for yourself, this episode might be exactly what you need to hear. Enjoy the show. Today's episode is sponsored by IzWiz VA, founded by Isabel Piercy. If you're a founder who's brilliant at what you do, but drowning in admin, emails, and the day-to-day running of your business, IzWiz VA was built for you. They're a boutique team of senior-level, virtual executive assistants, offering business leaders over 2 decades of experience and support from people who think ahead, take ownership, and genuinely care about your business as if it were their own. Clients come to IzWiz VA overwhelmed and spinning far too many plates. They leave calm, with clear systems and time back in their pocket. As a special offer for How Does She Do It podcast listeners, Isabel and her team are offering a Your PA for the Day experience, a full day of senior executive support for just £297. Visit izwizva.co.uk to book a free discovery call, quoting HDSDI, and please find an easy link in the show notes. Lucy Colgan, this is such a treat. I feel it's been long awaited, but at last we are sat here together, ready for a brilliant conversation today. How are you? And thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been 2 years, minus 6 days, I think, when we first crossed paths. And I couldn't be more grateful, actually, because you were one of my first guests, on the podcast. And you have been in my life ever since. be it at a distance. And yeah, it's been really lovely to be asked to be here.
I'm so grateful you said yes. And I was also grateful that you said yes when I asked if you would have me on your podcast. And I remember being so impressed and inspired that you were just kind of going for it because your podcast was quite new when I found it. And you were just, I guess this is the creative in you. You were just going for it and nothing seemed to phase you. And you've gone on absolute leaps and bounds since then as well. It's like you haven't stopped, and the momentum has just proved incredible. And we will talk about the podcast, of course we will. But first of all, I would love us to just kind of take it back to hear a little bit about what came first, where you've come from. Do you think you could talk to us about what you studied and how it became your career? Because actually, a lot of people study something and then that doesn't become their career. Yes, it becomes a foundation, a sort of stepping stone. But for you, I feel like it was in your blood. Tell us more.
Mm. Well, I have always been interested and committed to the arts from being very young. I went to dance class. My mum was my teacher for a long time. I started piano lessons at 5. And yeah, it was just part and parcel of our family life. We went to the theatre together as a family. My dad used to take me to concerts. And so when I got to the age of deciding what I was going to do for a career, the natural sort of decision was to go and study teaching. Not the arts, but teaching, because that was a proper job. And so I applied for my PGCE and I got rejected from all of the universities that I applied for. Apart from 2 universities who wrote back and said, "Why are you applying to do teaching? You should be doing performing arts." So I went to university and I did a BA Joint Honours in Theatre Performance and Music. And that was a great time of experimentation, personal growth, finding my feet. I was a long, long way away from home. So that creative freedom was just, yeah, all inspiring and all consuming. Open mic nights, gigs, you can imagine. And then I moved to Bath after my degree and I went into sort of temp work. I met a really lovely group of community dancers and we set up a collective and we would perform and we would teach each other class. And it was at that point that I decided to pursue my professional diploma in dance at Trinity Laban. So my mum and dad sat me down around the kitchen table. I can see us all sitting there now. And my dad said, "If this is something that you want to do, you're going to have to pay for it yourself." And I thought, okay, because it wasn't cheap. So I got a career development loan and I went to Laban and I did my professional diploma. And that just sort of opened my eyes to the world of dance and artistry and community and just the joy of creating and making with people. So that was a really lovely year. And then that kind of took me on to join the production team at Thompson Holidays. So I did a couple of seasons in Europe, being the production host. So I would, be on stage welcoming all of the acts. I had a cabaret act, and then after a couple of seasons, I came home, did some work in community arts, and then I decided to go and do my PGCE at 30. So I was a late bloomer in some ways because I was determined to work in industry before going into teaching. I wanted to live a life before I then started to work in education because honestly, wholeheartedly, it was the best decision. It has made me a better teacher. But yeah, that's my backstory in a nutshell, I suppose.
Beautifully told. I love, if I can love this, that the universities that you'd applied to questioned your choice. That to me sounds like sounds like people that really care and really looking at the bigger picture for you and kind of guiding you, or suggesting that perhaps that wasn't your best choice and you had a lot of talent that perhaps needed to be directed elsewhere at that point. I just think that's so positive because we hear a lot of less than positive experiences that young people can have. And so that really fills my heart. And to think that then you had that experience in industry, which sounded, varied and I'm sure fun as well. And then still went back to do the PGCE to really fuse everything together and be able to then pass on these incredible talents and this creativity to younger generations. God, what a powerful journey and experience that must have been. You spoke about doing the dancing when you were younger, and I hadn't realized that your mum was your teacher. That's incredible. Were you always a confident performer as a child and or a teen? And the reason I asked that is because although I did dance and it was probably my favorite hobby, actually, dancing up until I was about 16, what I wasn't was a confident performer. So you'd have never had me put my hand up and be the lead in a show, for example. Were you the kind of all singing or dancing kid in the family?
Um, no, I always struggled with confidence and still do actually on some level. I'm very aware of other people's gaze. I am very mindful of other people's opinions. And I think over the years, certainly as I was growing up, I learnt that it was better to keep myself small because that way I was safe. I wasn't putting my head above the pulpit. I was very, very happy to be in the background, contributing to the overall stage picture. Very happy in chorus. I have played lead roles in musicals. I have had a cabaret act, as I've mentioned. But underneath it all, I think I've always doubted my ability. And I do sometimes question whether or not I've actually prevented myself from going for certain jobs, auditions, because I've been fearful of rejection. I think this is very common for a lot of people. We're very mindful of that. Fear of rejection, the sting of being told you're not good enough. But I think now, as an educator and as a parent, I really do nurture the interests of the children I teach and of my little boy, whatever they are. I will have a group of children in with me teaching. For those people who don't know, teach dance and drama and music. And I've been teaching in primary for the last 4 years. And very often you'll find those students who do lack confidence. They don't want to be at the front singing or dancing, but they're very happy with supporting the show in the lighting and sound box, for example, or by helping with costumes or helping with stage design or management. And I think as the adults in the room, we need to show our children their talents. We need to show them what they are capable of. So often, I think we're so busy with trying to push children down a certain route that we lose sight of the whole person. And that takes time. That really does take time. So coming back to the point of the universities signposting me to do performing arts, yeah, there's the bigger picture there. They were encouraging me, inviting me to take that road less traveled, which is kind of where the wilderness of creativity sits. It's, not going down that expected path. And in order to take the road less traveled, you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's something that I've learned over the last 2 years. So although I do still struggle with confidence, I'm probably more likely to put myself in situations now where I do feel a little bit like an imposter, because I know that the growth that I'm going to experience will far outweigh the fear.
I've got so much I want to come back and unpack from that. But just for the moment, what you're doing is modeling so brilliantly to these children, to your son, that it's not just that we're saying, be brave, give it a go. We're showing that even as an adult, we can feel a little hesitant, a little uncertain. And it can still be a bit hard for us as well. It's not like we suddenly get to a certain age and a switch is flicked and we can just do everything. And I used to think that teachers just had it all sorted, and that was through no fault of their own. I was just looking up to them as,
Yeah.
you know, as the elder, as the wise ones that we were all learning from. And it's certainly a way that I have tried to bring up our boys as well over the years. And it can be really hard at times, actually, but it's not about it being easy. It's kind of about it being right and making an impact and perhaps being the road less traveled. And so I
Mm.
obviously love that synergy that you've just shared, and we'll come on to the podcast in a minute. I wanted to just come back to something you said about confidence and the imposter. And it really resonates with me because I feel that on the journey I'm on at the moment, I've recognized that actually it's rarely anyone else standing in our way or telling us we can't. When we dig even just a little, we can come to the realization that actually it is us putting protection in place, actually, because it is personal. We do feel it. And I think it was really interesting that you were talking about, you know, potential rejection or people judging, perhaps, say, the way you danced. Perhaps you were being examined or what have you. To be told that something isn't the best or quite so is incredibly personal, because that's you, that's your heart and your soul and your movement and your body. It really is the whole package, isn't it? And so if something is critiqued, you're going to feel it deeply. And I feel that there's a real association with business owning as well, because so often our businesses come from that seed of an idea which is within us. So again, it's that intrinsic part of us. So if sales are going badly, someone judges us, someone doesn't like our business, it's not something you just brush off, is it? It's something that you take to heart and you feel very personally. So I should imagine that the confidence that you have got now, even if you don't feel it is tip top, the most confident you could be, I should imagine you have been building layer upon layer of confidence through all of the things that you've experienced and been through over time. Would that be right?
Yes, I've definitely been building the confidence, but I've also been shifting out I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but in essence, that is what's been happening. So I've been removing those barriers. I've been examining what those limiting beliefs are. In fact, I had a conversation with Anna Xavier the other day about really looking at the perception that we have of ourselves. And in order to build that confidence, in order to take the next step, in order to really live the life, create the life that you want to lead, you have to be willing to let go of old identities, old patterns, those kind of opinions and those things that people have maybe said or done that have just stayed in our bodies. And this is why movement and yoga and meditation for me has been so powerful. The last couple of years, I have been more mindful about movement and exercise. I don't always get to go to the gym, but when I do go, I had the realization very recently that for the first time, I felt safe in my body. And that I actually expressed that to July, who I interviewed on the podcast, and said, the reason why we go to the gym for me is to feel safety in our body, to feel grounded. And when you feel connected to your limbs as you lay on the floor or as you run or whatever you're doing, you're breathing, you're shifting that energy around. And then once you've removed that stagnant energy, then you can build. The foundations have got to be right, Joe. I mean, you and I am sure, agree on this. If you don't have the right foundations, everything upwards is going to be rocky and it's going to tipple and topple over at the very slightest of things that somebody might say or do. So the last 2 years genuinely have been coming back to myself, unlearning a lot and building from much stronger foundations.
Incredible. And I think that that's a really, really positive, really reassuring message for anyone out there that perhaps is going through something at the moment, or they feel it's time for a new chapter, or they're at a bit of a crossroads in their life. Oh, I just got all the tingles.
Mm,
Because it's never too late to come back to ourselves, is it? And actually, another thing that I was thinking when you were listing was other people's expectations that we've hung on
yeah.
to as well. That can certainly come up for many of us, I'm sure. Oh, yeah, that just got me. So thank you for sharing that. There will be a listener out there today that has needed to hear that, and that is their permission slip. So thank
Hmm.
you. So you mentioned the wilderness of creativity. I would absolutely love for you to tell us a little bit more. So this is the podcast, which I was so lucky to be a guest on. I'd love for you to tell us, when did you start it? Why did you start it? And how on earth have you managed to keep it going alongside your job and parenting as well?
The short answer is I don't know. I don't know how I've managed to do this, but I will try and explain how. The Wilderness of Creativity was born on the 24th of April, 2024. And I remember that date very distinctively because it was the week anniversary that we lost our second baby. And the podcast has been a place for me to process the grief, genuinely. I had been working with Sarah McDowell. She's the co-host of the SEO Mindset podcast. I met her randomly at a birthday party. I won't go into I won't go into anything else about that because it was a children's birthday party. We met, we chatted, we connected, and I signed up to do her 6-week course, which was to launch a podcast. I had not even thought about launching a podcast. It wasn't even on my radar. I even asked her, is that even a thing to be a podcast host? So yeah, signed up, did the 6-week course, and it was absolutely brilliant and exactly what I needed because I was so lonely, Joe, at that time in my life. And the launch of the podcast, it was a coincidence that it was launched the week after the loss, because I remember distinctively saying to Sarah, telling Sarah that I was pregnant and that, it was going to be a new chapter and, maybe when I was on maternity leave, I'd be able to focus more time on the podcast. And, I was just kind of imagining that life, And so, yeah, 2 years later, and we are almost at 100 episodes, 95 plus guests. I've done some solo episodes, but I don't actually like the sound of my own voice. Or I edit my voice. I edit what I'm saying out a lot of the episodes because I'm so focused in on what the guest is saying. I love hearing people's stories. And through the podcast, as I said to you before we started recording, those guests have become my mentors. They have mentored me through the wilderness. I've found my confidence. I have connected with some incredible people who are doing brilliant, brave things in the world. I've interviewed people over in America. I've interviewed artists, entrepreneurs, business owners. Just so many different people who are passionate about creativity and how creativity can support us in our mental health and well-being. And listen, I'm the poster girl for it because the podcast has given me a new lease of life and it's given me a purpose. And I didn't even know that I needed something like that. You know, it's really been a place to play, to experiment, to be creative, to flex my teaching skills as well. Obviously being a drama specialist, I've really been able to focus in on storytelling and shining a spotlight on the main character, which are all my guests. And it's given me a hobby. My other half said to me a good few years ago before I had the podcast, Lucy, you need a hobby. You need to do something. And now he never sees me because I'm constantly in the wilderness.
Be careful what you wish for.
Oh dear. But yeah, it's been life-changing. Genuinely. I said genuinely before, but
Mm.
it's so much of the struggle I feel like I would want to share with everybody because it is part and parcel of my survival journey. But, a conversation just the other day reminded me that the internet doesn't need to know everything. We can focus on the good if we choose to see the joy and focus on the good. And it's not because I don't want people to see the process. Of course, I want people to see the process. But the internet doesn't need to know about the real struggles. You can keep some of that for yourself. And how I've managed to grow the podcast is really down to the listeners, down to those messages of support and encouragement that I've received from really good friends of mine, but also strangers. Yourself, Laura May, Nat, Nisha, our group, the WhatsApp group that we had, and still have, kind of created a buoyancy, like that momentum. And those collaborations through the podcast have kind of kept me going as well. Sheer determination to make it work because it means so much to me. And I guess in real life, I've only really been able to do this because my other half allows me the space and time to go and disappear for a little while. He is such an amazing dad.
Oh.
And he has just been there for me, you know? He is the unsung hero, really. I'm not going to tell him that. I'm not going to tell him that. But he kind of is in the background, always just, yeah, letting me do my thing. I think that's really important that you have a cheerleader.
It really is important. What a team you are. I think it's very astute of him to have said to you a few years ago, "You need a hobby." And he probably knew that there was so much bubbling away, there was so much creativity that could be unlocked at a point in your life, and it just so happened that you did. You went for it, and I should imagine that you didn't necessarily expect well, you certainly didn't expect to go to a children's birthday party and then agree to start a podcast, but I also don't expect that when you began that podcast course, that you could have believed or dreamt that it would come to this point. And to be nearly at 100 episodes just 2 years down the line is incredible. Be proud of that. Be really proud. But there is something I would love to come back to, and that was what
Yeah.
you said about your voice. You've got the most gorgeous, calming voice. And I remember when I spoke on your podcast, I remember thinking I was a bit barky because you have just got the most, I don't know, just such a kind and gentle way about you that I'm sure not just me, but anyone could listen to you for hours. So I really hope that you will put that kind of idea to bed and then allow yourself to do more solo episodes, because we need you, and we need your thoughts. We also need your brilliant storytelling and your brilliant interviewing, but I do think that yeah, we need to hear you as well. Let's move on and talk about creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than just being a nice to do when all the important stuff is done, let's talk about how important it really is, because I know that you are a massive, massive advocate for the use of creativity in whatever way that looks
Yeah.
to support our mental health and our well-being. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on that topic.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this over the last few months because time and time again, I am seeing articles and reading reports about arts funding being cut in schools and in our community settings. And I was recently doing my garage out, having a really good clear out of things. And I was coming across all of my sort of certificates and research and university papers and all of those sorts of things, and lots of articles about the value of the arts and creativity in education. I'm talking articles dated back to 1998. So for over 30 years, we have been talking about the value of creativity in schools and the long-term impact and the benefits of participating in creative pursuits. I'm tired of listening to the same thing because creativity is inherently ours. It is not something that we can be resold. It is not something that should cost an arm and a leg. It is something that is at our fingertips. It is something that enriches our lives. It belongs to us and has always belonged to us. And so I urge anyone that's listening today to actually think about the definition of creativity for yourself, because creativity looks different for everybody. There are people much smarter than I who have done countless research papers on this. But I think if we understand for ourselves what creativity means, so it might mean making something, producing a poem, because I know, Joe, you write. It could be a painting. It could be you in the kitchen cooking a meal from scratch. It could be gardening. It could be the way that you communicate and collaborate with people and create communities. I just think we need to open our minds a little bit to the possibilities of creativity and what they could potentially mean for us as a society, I think. You know, we're seeing so many young people struggling with their mental health and well-being. Nisha's doing an amazing job raising the profile of the support that's needed for people of all ages with their mental health and well-being. If we don't get it right in school, then we are setting our children up to believe that creativity does not belong to them. So we regurgitate the same narrative. I'm very passionate about this. It's such an important part of my work. From having worked in secondary to now working in primary, I've learnt that this is not this is not about teaching creativity. This is about teaching creatively. And
Oh,
so I think primary school children have it. They have the ability to be present. For me, that's creativity. They have ability to be present. They have an ability to adapt. That for me is creativity. They have the ability to see who is in front of them. No judgment. They just see who is in front of them and they react and interact without overthinking things. And they see the strengths in that person, the joy in that person, the value in that person. For me, that's creativity. I have absolutely loved being in primary because it means that I've been able to play. I have sung songs. I've been silly. I have done silly little voices. I have taught creatively. I have not taught creativity. And I think it comes back to what we were saying earlier, Joe, about modeling. We need to
yeah.
model that creativity is inherently part of being human. And it's not something that we need to overcomplicate. We need that big sky thinking. We do need to be able to bring those ideas into something that's grounded, that has purpose. But I think we just overcomplicate things. It is what it is. I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense, but that's where I'm sitting at the moment with it.
It makes complete sense. And I think you're right. It has been overcomplicated, and I feel it's been squeezed out as well. What I'm recognizing in the business owners that I'm working with is that a way that many of them, and myself included, find enjoyment, find growth, get inquisitive is through creativity in our 30s, 40s, 50s and beyond. Let's be honest, there are, I'm sure, people in their 90s still being creative. God love them. And that's wonderful. I want to be that person when I'm
Me
90
too.
who is and you mentioned play, playfulness. We've all kind of had to become so serious. And yet, if we allow ourselves just to kind of sway with it and have a bit of fun and experiment, and like you said, with those primary school children, they're not worried about judging something in front of them. They are just present and seeing it or that person or whatever it is for what it is or
Yeah.
what that person is. And we would do so well just to kind of take a lot of steps back and just relax those shoulders and embrace, because
Mhm.
creativity really is so many things, as you've spoken to. And the other thing I would say is that I think people are a little bit blinkered. Oh no, I'm not creative. I can't paint. No, no, no. That's not the only form of creativity. But I wonder whether it's because, there's so much time and effort spent on sciences and maths and English. And, we've
Mm.
almost had it sort of squeezed out of us going through education because there isn't the funding. And, I could go off on one about sport as well. I don't think there's the funding for sport. And actually, I believe that even if a kid isn't a runner or isn't necessarily a team player, just to move in some way would do their learning and their brain so much good. And the creativity comes as well.
I think what we have is a system of hierarchy when it comes to the subjects. So my question is, why are we still trying to prove the value of the arts when we know the value of the arts? Well, how many
Yeah.
times do we have to prove its worth? You know, so many people that I've spoken to on the podcast have said, "Oh, a teacher told me that I couldn't paint or that, I
Yeah.
couldn't dance." So many people have said, "Well, I didn't really have a lot of time to be creative because I was working so hard, I was raising my family, and obviously they are the priorities, but so is your creativity. So is that
Mm.
time for yourself to doodle, to be outside in the garden." But I think if I can touch upon very quickly this idea of adaptability,
Right.
because as we hit midlife, I mean, I'm 44 now, as we hit midlife, we sometimes get to a point where we feel like we've outgrown the life that we've created. So our career, our family, maybe the children are growing up, so different stages and ages and all of those sorts of things. And our ability to adapt to those changing landscapes, those different priorities, is part and parcel of being creative. Over the last 2 years, I have had to role play and imagine what my life could look like if I invested in the podcast or developing a business on the side of teaching. I have to imagine those things. I have to allow myself to go into that dream space in order to keep moving forward, to keep living a life that's aligned to who I am and who I am becoming. My grandma is 95. It's funny when you said, I want to be in my 90s and still being creative. My grandma's 95. She is so creative and so playful. She's done yoga for most of her life. She's up and down on the floor with my little boy. She's still, very humorous and silly, and she's always knitted. She's always made things with her hands. She used to work for Lotus, so made shoes, and she can still talk about that creative process. But I think there are a lot of misconceptions around creativity. But really, in order to design a life you want to lead, you have to be creative.
Yeah. The creativity's got to come first, hasn't it? Because you don't just kind of blink and it happens. You've got to set the cogs in motion, and yeah, that is creativity in itself. How exciting. I really hope that there are people listening going, I'd never thought of it like this. I am going to gift myself the time to just to daydream and to really start creating something that
Mhm.
could come to reality, and it probably will come to reality. I think you and I both
We
would
will,
agree
yeah.
on that. We're capable of so much more than we think we are, and anything is possible. Now, I was going to ask you to share an example of where in your life creativity has supported your mental health and well-being, but actually I feel we very much covered that with the podcast, which reminded me, and I feel dreadful. I wanted to just come back to what you said about the podcast and its
Mm.
conception, and
Yeah.
just to say how very bittersweet it was.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't realize that timing and how it aligned with such a difficult part in your
Mm.
life, such a difficult time in your life. And
Yeah.
to be processing grief in this way, I can't imagine how hard it was, but what an incredible positive way to work through that
Mm.
very, very difficult time, and then to have a positive effect on others through doing that as well. Yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. Really important to me. You wanted to talk about creative risks.
Mm.
I really like the sound of this, and I know it's going to inspire me. So, would you be able to share one creative risk you've taken and let us know, did it pan out or did it perhaps not?
I think we take creative risks every day, but I just don't think we are noticing them because they might just be so small that they're just there. They're in a blink of an eye, they're gone. I think creative risk with the podcast is very much linked to my mantra, which is action creates momentum. Because when you start thinking about risk, you start to put into place all of those fears and failures and challenges and it becomes very negative. And so I think with this mantra of action creates momentum is I give myself permission to not be good at something straight away. I mean, when I was talking to Sarah about this on the 50th episode, she said to me, "But Lucy, you'd never done podcasting before. Like, why are you expecting yourself to be an expert?" And I thought, oh, yeah. Why am I expecting myself to be an expert? This is ridiculous. We're never an expert in anything because we can never learn everything about whatever it is that we're doing. And it was something that AMC said to me recently. You know, she also brought that piece back to me in the sense that she said, why do we expect ourselves to be good at anything? Taking risk means that you are potentially going to fail at something. I think we need to be okay with that. I was chatting to Michelle James the other day. She's a creative facilitator. She works with lots of different organizations, individuals, and she really struggled with confidence and public speaking. So the thing that she did was that she enrolled herself into an improvisation class.
Oh, wow.
And she said to me, Lucy, when you are faced with an improvisation class in the middle with a group of actors and you're in the middle of something and then somebody says new choice and you have to pivot and change the scene or change the character or change the ending of the of whatever it is you're doing. She said in that environment you're safe to explore risk. And she said, and I completely agreed with her, as you can imagine, improvisation or drama classes should be mandatory throughout school, throughout training, wherever you go, vocational training, university, in business, you know, because it's by doing something like that that you learn how to fail.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I would agree with you. We have to do things before we're ready. We have to be bold. Otherwise, we're back to being in our own way again because no one else is telling us that we can't try something new. Yes, we might have that voice of the art teacher that told us our painting wasn't good enough, and yeah, that can be hard, but we've got to allow ourselves to let that go and
Mm.
not put anything else in our way. We're only here for a short amount of time, aren't we? We need to just go for it. And that's certainly something I've been doing over recent years. Well, probably more than less recent, but just for a long time now. And not putting that pressure on myself as if I was still at school and the teacher told me I could get whatever grade. And so I had to get that grade. Otherwise, I was a failure. Yeah, I'm really glad that, perhaps age helps. I don't put so much weight in
Mm.
the best results anymore, but it took many, many years, decades to release myself of that, actually. And I think that Sarah going to the improvisation class sounds just genius. I'd feel so uncomfortable, but now you've mentioned now you've mentioned it, I really think I need to look one up and give it a go. It's
I
only
think there's also two things here. Becoming a parent challenges your aversion to risk because I feel like I'm constantly failing at that. Even though I know I'm trying my very, very best, I get things wrong. So becoming a mum has made me far less fearless. And the second thing I would say is that it's important to remember for me that I'm speaking from a great place of privilege. I can afford to take some risks, others can't.
yeah,
And I think it's really important to practice that gratitude. You know, I have a job, a part-time job, which will give me some sort of financial security. I'm going to have to work out what I'm doing with the 3 days moving from September. But I have a roof over my head. I have a family that love me. I have incredible friends who are always, always there to cheer me on, to tell me those home truths. I am in a very privileged position. And I think it's worth remembering that when you're thinking, "Oh, do I post this on Instagram? I think it's a bit risky, or do I follow that lead in, to do that collaborative project? I think I can afford to do that. But other things I might not be able to take the risk for."
I would love for you to share your proudest moment of personal growth in the last year, because I feel like you're forever evolving,
Mhm.
and I want to give you a little bit of a spotlight so you can share with us.
I have finally realized that I matter to myself, that I can prioritize myself, and I can make decisions for myself that protect my energy. I can say no if I am invited to something and I think, you've got another big thing coming up later on this week. Why don't you just skip that? Why don't you just take this evening to rest? I don't feel as shackled to those people pleasing tendencies I have had a lot for a long time. So I'm really proud that I have finally started to understand that. And I'm probably, there's probably loads and loads of different things, but I genuinely think that that is probably the most important.
Really important. I think they're brilliant, and I know that they are going to speak to my listener and help them to recognize either that they have made some changes that have worked out for the best for them and they're proud of themselves, or it might be that they're not quite there yet. They're not quite where you're at, and they're looking to you as a role model who's going to help them be stronger and protect their energy. People please less, say no. And I'm one of those. I am that listener who's hearing you speak about, I've been invited to a second thing in the week because I've been overdoing it recently. Not because I'm going, oh, yes, me, 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 me. It's not like that at all. But I have overcommitted. And I think my body is starting to say to me, Joe, just take it down a notch or two. And that can be really hard. But it is about that listening, getting really interested in taking a moment in yourself, in observing you and what you need or what you don't need. So thank you
Mm.
so much. They made so much sense. Now we're going to have to move on
Hmm.
to the last three questions that I ask at
Yes.
the end of every episode. What so far has been the toughest thing for you about working for yourself?
For me, I really struggle with the interruptions. And that's not to say that I'm not grateful to have those interruptions. And I'm talking about having a child, because I will be in the wilderness and I will be editing, and my darling boy will come up to me and say, "Mummy, can I have an ice pole?" Yeah, yeah. I'll just do that in a minute. Let me just finish. Can you come and play with me? Can you come and do my wrestling? Can you come and do this? Can you? And I get it.
Oh,
I'm in such a wonderful space, as a mum, because my little one is still little, and I know that in 5, 10 years time I will be so desperate for him to come and interrupt me. But that's very real. That is something that I really struggle with, because when I'm in a project, when I'm doing something, I want to get it right and I want to spend time on it because I'm excited about it. So the interruptions, and so trying to, work around school pickups, school drop off, I'm really lucky because my other half loves, I say loves cooking. He does a lot of the cooking. So, he's very helpful around the house, which does allow me then to say to him, oh, can I just go into the wilderness and edit this? It's going to take me half an hour. And he'll say, yeah, absolutely. I think something else that I have struggled with is second guessing my ideas myself. So over the last couple of months, I've been seeking out mentors who I can sit down with and talk through some of my ideas and my strategy for growing the podcast. So just dedicating that hour to me and what I want to create has been really beneficial. But it's knowing who to ask for help from. And when you're working for yourself, you're often working in isolation because you're at home, you're in the home office. It's difficult to get to networking events and find those people that will resonate with what you're trying to create, which is why what you do is just so incredibly powerful and impactful, because I know you do in-person events, but you also offer the online networking. And for people who do have commitments, to be able to put something in the calendar and know that they're going to have time with you for that half an hour, 40 minutes can really make the difference in somebody's week. And I guess the last thing I would say would be doing everything. So I host the podcast, I edit the podcast, I market the podcast, I am the guest liaison officer, I am chief admin manager, I am the researcher. I do everything to do with the podcast, and I wouldn't have it any other way because that's where the creativity lives for me. But doing everything can be very time consuming. So I think for anyone who's listening, if there are things that you could maybe delegate or give to maybe automated systems and things like that that would maybe help alleviate some of that pressure from you doing everything, I think that's definitely something that I'm going to be looking at moving forward.
Wise words, really wise words. And you won't be surprised to hear that some of those things that you find a struggle working for yourself have come up before. And I think that's actually really reassuring, because you kind of feel, oh, it's not just me. And
Yeah.
somehow that gives a little bit of comfort when I hear that, if I'm going through something. And I certainly, in my membership, but also at the networking events, where we have non-members as well, I encourage people to share these things openly, because otherwise we all think everyone else has got it sorted. And why on earth are we struggling with it? Why are we feeling isolated? Why are we struggling to make the decisions and what have you? But actually, who are we not to be struggling with those things? This is not easy. This is not the easy option, working for ourselves. And a lot comes up that we have never faced in our employed life. And
Mhm.
we are experts at pivoting, but it's tiring. And the second
Mm.
guessing that comes with it, it's a lot. It
Yeah.
really is. It really is. So come on, let's move on to the best thing. What's the one best thing about doing this for yourself?
Well, it's because I'm doing it myself. um,
Yeah.
I was reading something the other day, and it kind of got me thinking around the sort of personality that I have. I excel in systems. So the education system works really well for my personality. I know where I'm going, what I'm doing, who I'm talking to, and I can fit in quite well. That's wonderful. However, it can feel oppressive. So I need that little outlet. And that's what I guess the podcast has been. It's made me appreciate my skill set, my potential as a business owner. I don't know if I'm going to grow a business from this. I don't know. It's only ever really been a hobby. But the fact that I'm doing it all is proof that I can do it all.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's been a real place of learning. And I've always been a learner. I love learning new things.
And I can see your face lit up as you say that, your eyes sparkling, because it runs so deep, that excitement in learning. And what I've witnessed is that you're constantly creating, you're constantly evolving, and how exciting actually that you don't know what is coming next, but it'll all happen as it's meant to. And yeah, I think it's brilliant. And actually, the last question that I like to ask is around the name of my business. How does she do it? Because I don't believe
Yes,
we can necessarily do all of it and remain healthy and happy and on track with everything. So is there anything perhaps you don't do anymore, or perhaps something that you do to ensure that you do remain kind of level and balanced with it all?
definitely. I've got so many different things that I could say to this. But I think number one is to stop consuming, to stop scrolling, because it is the thief of joy. And we must stop comparing ourselves to everybody else because we're doing our own thing. And the only reason why we should look to people is to feel inspired and to feel pleased and proud of them. That is something that I'm trying to install deep within my very soul because I think it's such an important learning. The second thing would be going back to what I started with was define creativity for yourself. Don't take anybody else's definition because it will not fit. You have to understand what creativity looks like, feels like, and how it reverberates around your body. And then the third thing would be to talk to people. I remember when we first met, you sent me the card, the poem, and
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about you just going up to strangers and giving them a poem, and then that sparking a conversation. Conversations, that's where the heart is. We can learn so much from other people. We can find our voice through those conversations. We can give a platform to those who feel like they don't have a voice in those conversations. So talk to each other, talk to me, talk to the person next to you. You never know what that might spark. That is where creativity lives. It's in the unknown. It's in the wilderness.
How beautifully put. Oh, Lucy, that was gorgeous. I would just like to add to that. I mean, I think all three of those were just brilliant, but I would love to add to that the
Mhm.
surprising magic in speaking to strangers. I decided recently that I'm actually going to start sharing a lot of these conversations I've had around my poetry over on my Soul Voice Instagram account, because they literally make my month when they happen. And I can very I can visibly see how much it makes the other person's day. I can see how connected we are. We have whether it's tears, whether it's joy, whether it's hug. These are people I have never met before. And I don't know why I'm holding on to those experiences and why I'm not sharing that beauty of human connection, of conversation. That's something that I certainly plan to do because it lights me up. And you just saying that reminds me that it might light someone else up as well. Before I say goodbye to you, you have to tell my listener where they can find you online.
So you can find me at the Wilderness of Creativity. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. where I post the video episodes. We have Substack, which is a growing community where I share sort of quieter reflections on the conversations I've been having in the wilderness with my guests. You can find us on Facebook as well, which is a lovely group of creatives who share what they are doing in the wilderness. I really want to build that platform this year because it is about celebrating and championing everything that other people are doing. And I think that's everywhere you could find me. Who knows where else you're going to find me in the next few months?
It- it's all to evolve, and that's wonderful. We don't have to have all the answers yet. Thank you so much for sharing such wisdom, such inspiration, and with such beautiful honesty as well today. I've loved our conversation. I know we could go on for hours. We often have gone on for hours, but thank you for your time today. It's been beautiful having you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, I'd love you to take a moment to share and subscribe too. Come and join me over at How Does She Do It Life on both Facebook and Instagram. And until we speak again, I wish you a wonderful week ahead.